Today, we're diving into one of the most bizarre, most baffling neurological conditions you've probably ever heard of, foreign accent syndrome.
I mean, really think about that for a second. Could you go to bed tonight sounding like you and wake up tomorrow sounding like a complete and total stranger? It sounds like pure science fiction, but for a tiny number of people, it's very, very real.
And of course, the media just eats these stories up. You can't blame them. You see headlines like, "A mom in Texas gets jaw surgery and suddenly sounds British," or "An English woman gets a terrible migraine and starts speaking with what her friends think is a Chinese accent." It even happened to the singer George Michael, who said he had a West Country accent for a bit after waking from a coma. These stories are wild, but what is really going on?
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we have to start by clearing up the single biggest misconception. Let's call it the accent illusion.
This quote from Professor Nick Miller absolutely nails it. He says the whole idea of a foreign accent is really in the ear of the person listening, not in the mouth of the person speaking. That's the key right there. So let's break this down. The myth is that someone just magically downloads a perfect, authentic French or Russian accent. The reality? Not even close. What's actually happening is they've developed a motor speech disorder. Their brain is having trouble coordinating all the tiny muscle movements for speech. This messes up their vowels, their rhythm, their intonation, and our brains, which are pattern-seeking machines, try to make sense of it. The closest box we can fit it into is often a foreign accent. It's a bit like seeing faces in the clouds, a phenomenon called pareidolia. The accent isn't really there. Our brain is just imposing a pattern on it. Okay, so if it's not some strange linguistic magic, what is it? Well, at its core, foreign accent syndrome is a neurological problem. It's a physical glitch in the brain's wiring. And this glitch almost always follows some kind of neurological event. Stroke is the big one. It's the most common cause by a long shot. But it can also be triggered by a serious head injury, a severe migraine, or in some very rare cases, it can be a developmental issue someone has from a young age. And when doctors look at brain scans, they find that the damage tends to be in very specific areas. We're usually talking about lesions in the brain's left hemisphere, which for most of us is the side that handles language. Specifically, it's the parts that control the actual mechanics of talking, the motor cortex, Broca's area, the cerebellum. Think of it as a physical injury to the machinery that produces speech.
Now here's something interesting. There seems to be a pattern in who gets it. When researchers looked at over 100 cases, they found that about 2/3 of the patients were female, and it typically hits adults, usually between 25 and 49 years old. Why that is, well, that's still a big question mark for researchers.
So, given how incredibly strange and rare this is, how in the world do doctors figure out that this is what's actually going on?
And when I say rare, I mean unbelievably rare. To give you some perspective, in the nearly 70 years between 1941 and 2009, there were only 62, that's 62, officially recorded cases in the entire world. That kind of rarity makes diagnosing it a huge challenge. Yeah, you don't just walk into a clinic and get a quick test for this. It takes a whole team of experts. You've got neurologists running MRIs and CT scans, looking for that physical damage in the brain. Then speech pathologists come in and do this incredibly detailed analysis of the person's speech, breaking down every little change. And on top of that, neuropsychologists do assessments to rule out any other issues. It's a real team effort.
And the diagnosis has gotten a lot more sophisticated over time. It's not just one single thing. Researchers now recognize 4 main subtypes. The most common is neurogenic, which is caused by that physical brain damage we've been talking about. But you also have developmental cases that show up in childhood, psychogenic cases that are tied to a psychiatric condition, and even a mixed type, where there's a brain injury that's made more complex by psychological factors.
But beyond all the science and the brain scans, it's so important to remember that we're talking about real people here. People whose entire lives can be turned upside down. So let's talk about the human experience of this disorder.
The struggle to understand this has been going on for over a century. It was first written about way back in 1907, but it was a really tragic case in 1941 that showed just how devastating it could be socially. And get this, the name foreign accent syndrome wasn't even invented until 1982. That just goes to show how long it took the medical world to even start putting a label on this experience.
And this gets to a really critical point. It's easy for us to hear about this and think, wow, that's a cool party trick. But for the people living with it, it's not a superpower. It's a speech disorder. They don't feel like they suddenly have this cool new voice. They feel like they've lost control of their own voice. And that can be deeply upsetting and incredibly isolating.
That 1941 case was a woman named Astrid L. from Norway. During World War II, she was injured by shrapnel from an air raid. When she recovered, her Norwegian accent had changed, and to the people around her, it sounded German. Now you can just imagine what that was like. In Norway, during World War II, she was accused of being a collaborator. She was shunned by her own community. It's just a heartbreaking example of how this disorder can completely shatter a person's social world.
And that kind of brings us to the final lingering thought here. Our voice is so fundamental to who we are. It's how we express ourselves, how we connect with people. So the real question foreign accent syndrome forces us to ask is a deep one. If our voice is no longer our own, who are we?